Most young halfbacks want to run the team, but they haven't even learned how to run a play properly. They try to control the game before they can control defenders. They want to be the general, but they haven't earned that rank yet. And this is where taking a structured approach to your training and development comes in. Now, this is part 2 of how to actually play halfback. And if you haven't watched part 1 yet, go back and do that first, because everything we're covering today builds directly on top of that. In part 1, we introduced the halfback pyramid, a 3-tier model that builds your game from the ground up. Tier 1 is close quarters, where you master everything in the immediate space around you, your individual skill set and your physical attributes. Tier 2 is the engagement zone, where you learn how to actually execute plays, run block shapes, sweep movements, and engage defenders with purpose. And Tier 3 is command and control, where you manage the game, lead your team, and take full control of tempo and direction. We'll cover Tier 3 in part 3, so make sure you keep an eye out for when that drops. But in today's video, we're looking at Tier 2, the engagement zone. Now, just quickly, before we get started, for those of you who don't know me, my name's Joe Murphy. I co-founded League Fit Academy 9 years ago to help educate young rugby league players about how to build their body, their skills, and their mind. And we now work with thousands of players across 6 different continents right around the globe. Now, let's start by looking at Tier 2 of the halfback pyramid, or what we call the engagement zone, okay? This is where you actually execute plays, block shapes, sweep movements, X-plays, anything and everything designed to engage the defensive line, manipulate defenders, and pull that defensive line apart. Essentially trying to put opposition defenders under as much pressure as possible and causing them to make poor decisions and bad defensive reads that can lead to broken tackles, strong runs, line breaks, and ultimately try scoring opportunities. Now, before you start working on this area, you need to be sure you've got Tier 1 covered. Because if your catch pass isn't up to scratch, it won't matter how well you run the play if you can't hit the receiver every time with a decent pass. But let's just assume that your catch pass is on point. You now need to run the shape that you're going to be using in a game. And in this context, when I say shape, I'm talking about running your part in the actual play. So for argument's sake, let's take what is sometimes called an X+. An X+ is simply when you receive the ball, look to pull a runner underneath, you don't hit him, you dummy to him, and then you hit a receiver on your outside. Now, there's a ton of variations to this play, but we're just looking at a nice, normal, boring, or vanilla flavored version of the play. When done like this, it's pretty straightforward, and it's a very common play, used from under 10s right through to NRL level. But just because it's straightforward, it doesn't mean that it's simple. And here's the thing. In a minute, I'm going to be telling you that you need to be running this play down the park on your own, and you need to be getting in 20, 30, maybe even 40 reps to build up that muscle memory so that when you're in a game situation, you've got that really high level of both confidence and competence to be able to execute it perfectly every time. But to get to that point, you're going to have to run an absolute ton of reps. But there's an old saying that's still floating around that says practice makes perfect. Now, this is wrong, incorrect, stupid, right? Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. And I'll say that again because repetition deepens the impression. Practice makes permanent. So if you're practicing the play incorrectly, then when it comes to the game, you'll also run that play incorrectly. So how do you fix it so that you can run the play the right way at both training and during the game? Well, there's 3 keys you need to remember when running any play. First, you must play straight. Second, get your spacing right. And thirdly, you need to communicate. Now, you need to make sure that you incorporate all 3 key elements, because if even one is missing, the play will break down or fail completely. Think of it like a 3-legged stool. Take away just one leg and the whole thing collapses. You're left on the ground, flat on your back, looking and feeling like a bit of a goose. And if you leave out any one of these 3, that's exactly what's going to happen whenever you try to run the play. So let's have a closer look at each of them right now. Key number 1 is to play straight. This is the biggest mistake a half can make, which is to drift across sideways, bringing the defense with you as you go. Playing straight means you need to square up. Square your hips up so that they're pointing straight up and down the field and not pointing at 45 degrees out towards the sideline. What this means is that you need to run directly at defenders to hold them and fix them in place. This prevents defenders from sliding across the field, and it opens up space for support runners. So let's have a look at what happens when you straighten up with the ball in hand. This O is you. You receive the ball running an overs line and then straighten up. The defender you run at, X, now needs to make a decision. Does he straighten up on you as well? Because if he does, then that creates space on his outside shoulder. And these days, that's the exact gap that the lead runner in a block play is looking to run into. So let's say he straightens up, but the defender on his outside shoulder doesn't. He keeps moving up and out. You as the half then hit the lead runner, or as it's sometimes called the front door, and he goes through. The attack wins. Here's an example of this from Origin, when Nathan Cleary hits lead runner Liam Martin, who goes straight through. Now, if we run it again, this time the defender that's marking up on you doesn't see you as a running threat, and they don't straighten up at all, but rather keep sliding, which gives you as the half the opportunity to try to beat that A defender on his outside shoulder with your speed, which is often more than doable because that player is typically a bigger, slower forward. Again, attack wins. Here's an example as Jamal Fogarty squares up to the defence, but the defence keeps sliding, allowing him to go through. Okay, so we've looked at squaring up and going yourself. If your opposite number doesn't square up, but rather continues pushing out. We've looked at hitting the lead runner in a block shape. If your opposite number does decide to square up on you, but the defender on his outside shoulder doesn't square up, leaving space for that lead runner to go into. So what if your opposite number squares up on you and the defender on his outside shoulder also squares up on the lead runner in the block shape? What do you do then? Simple. You just go out the back to what's called the sweeper, the sweep play, or the backdoor runner, any of those names, because this is what you need to understand. In a nutshell, your main goal as a ball player is to take initiative and make the defensive line react to what you're doing. Once they react, you can take advantage of that, but you have to make them react. Taking that final example we just used where your opposite number squared up on you and the defender to his outside also squared up on the lead runner in the block shape, where you pass the ball out the back to the sweeper, what are the options from here? Well, it really depends on how the rest of the defensive line reacts to the two defenders that have straightened up. Because if they keep sliding, then there'll be a gap right there that the sweeper for him just to run straight through. Attack wins again. Here's an example of the hammer doing just that for the Dolphins, okay? But what if the whole D-line squares up? If this happens even for a moment, space will have been created on the outside, then it's up to the attacking side to take advantage of that space created. Here's the Tigers doing just that, going through the hands to finish it off in the corner. But all of this started because the half squared up, he straightened the attack, and he forced the defensive line to make a decision. Or as you often hear rugby league commentators on the TV say, they'll refer to someone like Nathan Cleary, Tom Dearden, or Ponga, and they'll say that player asks a lot of questions of the defensive line. Right? So remember, whenever you're running any kind of play, don't continually crab sideways, but instead square your hips up, run at a player, forcing him to make a decision. Be the half that asks questions of the defensive line. Now, the second key is to get your spacing right. And what that often means is usually to get deeper, okay? There's nothing more common than seeing a side run shape and ball work at training, look $1 million doing it, but once they get into a game, it all breaks down. Now, yes, an opponent rushing up in your face will cause players to get things wrong. So can the pressures of simply playing a game with family, friends and a crowd watching. But this is why spacing is even more important. When pressure is applied in a game-like situation, depth often disappears, which takes away a side's ability to run that play properly. To give you an example of this, have you ever noticed how bands often play their songs faster live than they do on the actual recording? You know, that's adrenaline and momentum in action. When they're on stage, the energy's high, the crowd's buzzing, and even without meaning to, the band starts to speed up everything. Why? Because excitement and pressure make you want to go faster. It makes you want to rush things. Now, it's exactly the same with footy. You get the ball, the D-line's charging out at you, your brain speeds everything up, and suddenly your spacing is off, your timing is off, and the play breaks down. A counter to this is to know that that's going to be the case and run your training reps 10 to 15% deeper than you otherwise would. That way, when you're in a game situation, that natural increase in excitement, energy, pressure will put you right where you need to be. So always be mindful of your spacing. Now, the third and the final key is you need to communicate properly. Effective communication means that every player on the field knows exactly what they need to do within the structure of the play that you're about to run, okay? And as a half, you're the one responsible for making that happen. If the play breaks down, that's on you. Now, we'll talk about this more in the next episode when we look at tier 3 of the halfback pyramid. But as a half, you need to understand that it's not enough to just call the play. You need to be the one orchestrating it. That means telling your lead runner where to go and reminding your sweep player how deep he needs to be sitting. Sometimes that's verbal, other times it could be a glance, a nod, or a hand gesture. But that communication has to be clear, sharp, and confident. Let's say you're running a basic block shape to the right. You've got a lead runner jamming in and a sweeper out the back and a centre who's waiting for the ball. Before the play even starts, you've called the shape 2 plays ahead loud enough for everyone involved to get themselves into position. You point at your lead runner. Let's say his name's Henry. Henry, hit headgear's inside shoulder. He now knows you want him to run at the inside shoulder of the guy in the headgear. You glance at your fullback out the back and you say, get deeper, they've been rushing us all day. He listens, he gets deeper. That 2 to 3 seconds of direction can be the difference between a play that works and a play that doesn't. So communication isn't just about talking, it's about creating clarity so the players around you know exactly what they need to do. That's communication. So here's the bottom line. You can't get good at this by just watching footy or running a play once or twice at training. You need to get the reps in over and over again. You've got to do it both on your own and with your team. You've got to do it at full speed and you've got to do it under pressure, because it's only with repetition that you start to develop the timing, the instincts, and the confidence to execute it when it actually matters. And every single time you're practicing your shape, you must remember to play straight, get your spacing right, and communicate clearly. If you miss even one of these, the whole thing will fall apart. Now, if you haven't already watched part 1, where we broke down the close quarters game, go back and check that out, because without that base, none of this works. And keep your eyes out for part 3, where we'll go in depth on the final tier, which is command and control. And that is how you build your game the right way from the ground up. Trust me, because I'm Joe, and Joe knows.